Did you know you could make the most intensely chocolatey, almost creamy sorbet with just water, cocoa powder and sugar? Hi, I'm Tash and welcome to another recipe video, and today we're going to make a deep, dark, dense, super creamy chocolate sorbet with just those 3 ingredients. I first came across this 3 ingredient chocolate sorbet recipe on a really old website. It was back in the day of Angel Fire, so really early internet days, and back then I didn't have an ice cream maker, so I just did it the old fashioned way of making the actual ice cream batter, freezing it just for 1 hour, taking it out, mashing it with a fork, freeze another hour, take it out, mash, freeze hour, take out, mash and freeze. Bit of a lengthy procedure, but that's the way to make ice cream if you don't have an ice cream maker, or if you don't use a no churn recipe, of which I have a few. But today this one will need an ice cream maker for quick and easy results. If not, you'll have to use the freeze and mash method. And the website I found this on was a website called Recipe Link. I literally printed out the piece of paper, it is ancient. Thankfully, the recipe on Recipe Link did reference who first made this recipe. There was a chap called Bruce Weinstein, and it was from his book, The Ultimate Ice Cream Book. And a few months ago, I recently found my old tattered printout of this recipe when I was going through some old recipe books at my parents' house, while I was cat sitting for them when they were on holiday. I was looking for some other recipes in particular, but then I found one of my old collections of printouts that I did when I was quite young, and I found that recipe amongst them. Back at the time when I found the recipe, it was still quite cold out, but now it's toasty hot, it's summer, so it is the perfect time to redo it, especially now that I actually have an ice cream maker. I have adapted the quantities a little bit. Being an American recipe, everything was in cups, so I had to convert cups to milliliters and grams, and there are slight differences, so I had to adjust both the grams, the milliliters and the cooking times because I couldn't get it exact right. For you to touch it, I also changed up the sugar from the original recipe, which just used plain sugar. I use light muscovado sugar because I like the caramelly taste, and I changed the method with the water as well. I use hot water instead of normal cold water. Just helps the sugar dissolve a bit faster. So I did adapt the recipe a tiny bit just to make it a bit easier to make it metrically and to do accurate measurements. And I also added a cheeky little add-in as well. So the original recipe is 3 ingredients, you could still make it. I decided not to stop there, and just before I put the whole thing in the freezer to store, I decided to mix in some chopped dark chocolate as well. On a side note, whenever I think of the word sorbet, which as you would assume is very French sounding, I always remember what an ex-colleague of mine told me about the origin of the word. Actually, it comes from the Italian word sorbetto, which is hilarious because then technically the English name for this dessert should be sorbet. Doesn't quite sound quite as fancy, does it? And I actually googled this just to verify just now, and yes, it does come from the Italian word sorbetto. Sorbet is the French word for sorbetto. And that's not all. The Italian word sorbetto comes from the Turkish Ottoman word şerbet, which originally was a drink. So you can trace the origin so far back. Basically, my takeaway from all of this is we should actually be calling it sorbet, but it sounds too funny, so sorbet it is. So with all that said, let's go to the kitchen and see how it's done. We're going to work on the stove today because what we want to do is create a little bit of a thick chocolate syrup, or rather cocoa powder syrup. This is going to make the ice cream, or rather sorbet, extra smooth. Here I have 250 grams of light muscovado sugar, and now I'm going to do some sifting because I'm also going to add in 100 grams of cocoa powder. Let's give this a sift in. And now I'm going to gradually stir in 500 milliliters of hot water. This is just off the boil. And now that this is well combined, the sugar should have also dissolved, so it's now nice and smooth. Just going to give the edges of my pan a little clean up because when I pour the syrup later, I don't want chunks of cocoa powder in it. I'm going to switch the heat on, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring this to a boil, so let's wait until it's boiling. This is properly boiling now. Do keep an eye on it, remember, so it doesn't boil over. Give it a stir. Now I'm going to turn the heat right down because we want to bring it down to a simmer. So now that it's only just simmering, I'm actually going to simmer it for 3 minutes. And in those 3 minutes, do give it the occasional stir just to make sure it doesn't bubble up too much. It's been bubbling away for 3 minutes now. Let's give it a bit of a stir. As you can see, it's thick enough to coat a spoon. So let's take this off the heat now, and we're going to let it cool down to room temperature, so let it cool completely. Now that our chocolate syrup is cool, it's time to make some sorbet. Let's pour it into the bucket. Gonna pop our bucket straight into our ice cream maker. And we're going to pop the lid on with our churner. Lock it. And I'm going to turn it to ice cream mode. This machine takes about 30 minutes and then it will beep at me and then it will be soft and scoopable. Alright, the ice cream maker has beeped. That means we are ready. Gonna take out the bucket. It's nice and frozen. Gently ease out our spatula, the paddle. Obviously we're not going to waste any of this. Oh, look at that. And this is basically our chocolate sorbet, our 3-ingredient chocolate sorbet. You can now scoop this into a freezable container and store it in the freezer. However, I'm going to go one step further. Once any sorbet or ice cream is done to this consistency, it's then that you want to add any mixins that you want. And this time I'm actually going to add 100 grams of chopped dark chocolate. This is totally optional. Often when I've made this chocolate sorbet, I just leave it as it is. But this time I want a bit of texture. So this is dark 74%, I think, KK solids. And this was vegan too, so this whole thing is totally vegan. No dairy or anything. Just going to give this a gentle stir. And I've been storing this container in the freezer, so it's already really cold. I'm going to put this straight in. We're going to work fast. Remember, this is frozen and it's already starting to melt, so work fast. I'm going to pop the top on and freeze it for about 4 hours so it's nice and firm and scoopable. Oh my gosh, it is melting absolutely fast. My flat is so hot. Let me quickly do a slow-mo and then I will eat it and talk through it. 31.3 degrees inside and this is now fast turning into soup, so I'm going to take a bite. Cheers. That's good soup. I'm literally sweating. Don't just take it from me, like do a quick Google search. Heat in the UK hits different because it is so muggy, it's so humid. In all seriousness though, this is an amazing sorbet. It's so smooth, almost creamy. You would not believe that this is dairy free and just with cocoa powder, sugar and water. That was super simple. I'm going to eat the rest of this before it really is just soup. So there you go, 3-ingredient chocolate sorbet, or as we discussed, sorbet. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's recipe video and I hope you'll join me next Wednesday for my next one. Get the full written recipe on my blog tashcakes.com, follow me on Instagram, I'm tashcakes.taste, and find me on TikTok too, I'm tashcakes there too, but my handle is food in slow motion. Subscribe and hit the notification bell if you'd like to see more. Give this video a like if you liked it to help other people find it. Comment down below if you'd like me to make anything in particular, and I will see you all next time. Be good, be nice, and have a good week. It's literally just a few minutes later and look at the state of that. No wonder why my sorbet was melting so fast.